and welcome to the 100th episode of Making Stitches. In celebration of hitting this podcasting milestone, the tables have been turned, and my lovely friend Christine Perry sat in the interviewer's chair to ask me some questions for a change about my life, about my blog, and how the podcast first started. My first few episodes were recorded either over Facebook Messenger, because I didn't realise how to do it, and then I managed to figure out Zoom. The wonderful world of Zoom opened up to us.
Yes, pandemic on one hand and Zoom on the other, and they were just
a match made in heaven.
Well, kind of.
I'll pop back again at the end, but for now I shall leave you in Christine's capable hands. I hope you enjoy it.
Hello and welcome to Making Stitches podcast. I'm Christine and I write a blog called Winwick Mum where I teach beginners to knit socks. And don't worry, you're not in the wrong place. Today's episode is a bit different and a bit special, and today's guest is none other than Lindsay Weston, your Making Stitches podcast host. This has been an exciting anniversary year for Lindsay, and we thought that a fun way to celebrate would be to have her guest on her own show, and then she can tell you all about what's been going on. Now, as you'll know from the podcast, Lindsay has been a maker for as long as she can remember, and as a former journalist who loves hearing people's stories, she's got the perfect excuse to chat to fabulous creative people and tell you all about their stories. Lindsay is a blogger, a journalist turned podcaster, and a crochet designer, and mum to 3 boys, and has a day job in marketing in the charity sector as well, so it's definitely a busy life. I can also tell you that Lindsay is a great friend, and I'm so happy to be here today to turn the tables on her and put her behind the mic for a change. Welcome to Making Stitches, Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Christine. What a lovely introduction.
I don't sound quite the same as you, but I've had a good go.
You're doing brilliantly.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've got lots to ask you, but let's start with what we're celebrating. So I've got written down here 10 years of blogging and 100 episodes of Making Stitches podcast. Is that right?
Yes. Well, yeah, it was 10 years of blogging in the summer. So in July 2015, I started my first blog, Postcard from Gibraltar, which then morphed into Making Stitches, the blog that I have now. And Making Stitches podcast is 5 years old this year. And officially, this is episode 100. In actual fact, I think there might have been about 105 episodes because there's been a few bonus episodes along the way. But officially, this is number 100, which is a little bit bonkers.
That's incredible.
I can remember when I did the first one and I thought, is anybody going to listen? And also, would I be able to sustain it? Because there's a thing called pod fade I've heard about. Lots of people start podcasts, especially people starting podcasts during the pandemic, as I did. Mm-hmm. And it seems like a great idea, but then you run out of momentum and then they kind of die off and fall by the wayside. So I'm quite chuffed I didn't suffer from pod fade and I managed to keep going.
No, you've definitely not. It's amazing. You've spoken to some fabulous people over the years that you've been doing it. So you say in your intro to the podcast that you've been a maker for as long as you can remember, and I expect that, like many people of our generation, because we're not that far off in age, are we? A relative was the one to get you started. Can you remember the time when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the late 1970s and into the 80s, and I think that was a time when there was a lot more kind of making in the home.
Yes.
And make, do and mend still was hanging around.
Yes, definitely.
And we'd have dusters that were made from old bed sheets and all that kind of thing. So Mum was a practical sewer. She didn't really sew for pleasure. I don't think she got a great deal of pleasure out of that. But she did teach me to sew and to knit. But my mum is Scottish, and my Scottish grandma, who lived in Glasgow, she used to take me off my mum's hands for 2 weeks every school summer holiday, because I had a younger brother, and I used to go and stay with my gran. and had a wonderful 2 weeks, which would then, in theory, give my mum a break because she only had one child to look after during that time. And I think secretly my gran really enjoyed it because it meant that she could dig out her sewing box that had amazing things in it, lovely satin ribbons and pieces of lace that she'd saved over years, and little wooden bobbins with fancy coloured cotton thread on. And she also had a Singer sewing machine with a crank handle, which she taught me how to do basic sewing. So I remember making a Cindy ball gown on her hand cranked sewing machine with some lilac satin ribbon and some lace that she'd saved from a different project. And she also taught me she encouraged my knitting as well. She taught me to crochet, but it didn't really stick at the time. But one thing she always did at the beginning of the 2 weeks when I'd arrive, she'd take me to a department store in the centre of Glasgow on the bus. I can't remember the name of it now, unfortunately, but in this department store there was a craft section, and we'd go and we'd pick a project to do. I think the first time we went, it was like painting stencils onto little cork coasters, and I made a set of coasters so that at the end of the 2 weeks I had something to show for my time, and it was a present for my mum.
Oh, how lovely. What a really nice thing to do.
I know.
That's such a nice memory to have that, isn't it?
Exactly. So that I think painting was the first year, and then after that she took me and introduced me to embroidery kits.
Oh yes.
And we went in, and I think it was two goldfinches sitting on a thistle, and it was like crewel work embroidery, and she was teaching me how to do it, and I'd finished it by the end of the first week. I just couldn't put it down. It really grabbed me. So we ended up going back into Glasgow to buy another one, which was a little duckling sitting on a fluffy nest, and I made that as well. And they're still hanging in my mum and dad's spare bedroom.
Oh, how lovely.
And sometimes I go in and look at it and think, I can't believe I made that when I was about sort of 12, 13. Even though I say so myself, it was quite good.
But isn't that lovely that you've still got something, and to have somebody to have the time and the patience to sit and show you how to do it, because I think that's what a lot of people miss now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's one of the lovely things about your podcast is because you speak to so many people with so many crafts, then it helps somebody who's listening to think, oh, I really fancy doing that. And then they can go off and find that person, or they can dig out whatever it was that they may have remembered that they used to do, and so you know your previous making and now your connections with the more modern makers is wow, goodness, you're inspiring so many people.
Oh, that's lovely to say. Well, I mean, it is down to people passing on that skill, really, at the end of the day. I mean, I can remember my gran had a next-door neighbour, Mrs. Campbell, who had two sons who were not at all interested in anything crafty. But Mrs. Campbell was a major leagues maker. She did patchwork quilting and cross-stitch and everything. And I think when my gran got a bit fed up with me wanting to know what we were going to do next, she'd bar me off next door, and Mrs. Campbell would get her cross-stitch Aida fabric out, and she'd set me off on that journey as well.
She probably loved having somebody to talk to if her little boys were not that interested.
Absolutely, yes. But it's thanks to them, really, I think, that built my foundation and really sort of lit the spark of creativity and wanting to make things.
And such a positive experience, I think, as well, if you've got somebody who can spend the time and will if you do. Well, I call them unique design features rather than mistakes. But if they can help you to correct them or ignore them, and then you're always proud of what you've done, then, aren't you?
Very much so.
And that's lovely. That's lovely. So what I mentioned as part of your bio, and what I know is that you come from a journalism background. So you've gone from the crafting that you did when you were small, and it was in those years, so in the 80s and 90s, it was more difficult to find a career where you could really do something with the crafting, and you instead moved over to journalism. Was there a link? What pulled you in that direction?
When I was a child, I wanted to do 1,000,001 different things. If you'd asked me from one day to the next, one day I wanted to be a nurse, which wouldn't have worked because I had a phobia of blood, so I'm not sure how that would have worked. But, and then I wanted to be a fashion designer, and then I wanted to be a TV presenter, and I wanted to do various different things, and it would change all the time. And I can remember wanting to go down the fashion design route because I liked drawing, I liked fabric, and I liked colours and patterns. And I went to a grammar school. We had the 11 plus where I grew up, and I went to a grammar school, and they very much tried to push you down academic routes.
Right.
I was basically told craft and that kind of sewing, that's for your spare time. You want to be focusing on a proper career. So I went to university. I studied English literature and American studies, which was fascinating. I loved doing that. And then it was kind of, I didn't know what to do next. But as a child, I'd been fascinated by TV. And watching Blue Peter in particular.
Oh, well, Blue Peter was a big thing.
It was
twice
amazing.
A week? Was it on
I think
twice
so,
a week?
Tuesday and a Thursday or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really fancied my chances as a Blue Peter presenter because then I could actually get to make things, a little house for Cindy out of a cardboard box.
You prepared earlier.
So I guess when I finished my degree, from being 16, I had a summer job. Because we had connections through the church that my family went to with Manchester United.
Right.
And all the girls, because the boys generally fell by the wayside, but if the girls stuck at Sunday school until they were 16, or anybody, girls or boys, they were pretty much guaranteed a job at Man United when they did their GCSEs.
Brilliant.
And that was because in those days, in 1990, when people paid for their season tickets, they'd turn up at the ticket office with a bag full of money, an envelope full of notes, or they'd write a cheque because you didn't do it all online. So they needed...
There was none of that then, was there? Everything was cash and cheques still.
Exactly. So they needed seasonal staff to come in, but they needed people that they knew they could depend on when there was literally piles of £50 sitting on the table. So I managed to get a job in the ticket office when I was 60, and then I went back every summer after that, and then all through my degree as well. And then at the end of the final summer, after I'd graduated in the summer, my boss called me in. I was working in a different office by this point, and he said to me, "So Lindsay, what are you going to do next?"
Oh, no pressure there then.
And he was like, "I don't know." And in those days, you couldn't Google how to get a job as a researcher in television or whatever. I mean, I literally wrote letters and put them in the post, and you'd get some pamphlets back through the post with your stamped addressed envelope, and that was how you found information. So he said, "I've heard you're interested in the media." And I'd said, "Well, yeah, I am, but I can't seem to get to speak to anybody. I just get these leaflets through the post." And we had Granada, the ITV channel, not far from where I was, and also the BBC in Manchester as well. But it was like there were these amazing places that you couldn't get in the door of.
No, that's right. There was almost like shining citadels on a hill that you couldn't approach, weren't they?
Exactly. So he said, amazingly, "Well, we've got Manchester United Radio. And we need somebody to come and work for us. Would you be interested?" And I just went, "Yes," without even asking, "What's the job?" And he said, "Right, okay, yeah, we need a broadcast assistant." And I said, "Oh, right, fantastic," thinking I've not got a clue what a broadcast assistant is, but it sounds good.
Yeah.
And he said, "Shall we start now?"
Oh, right.
And 15 minutes after saying yes, I was in the studio being introduced to my boss, and I spent 18 months working on match days on Man United Radio, working behind the scenes, putting reel-to-reel tapes onto the tape machines for the match commentary and the interviews.
My goodness, that's all old-fashioned stuff.
I know,
now,
really ages me that. And I was taught how to edit using a razor blade and a China graph pencil and some sticky tape to stick the edits together.
Excellent.
And I did that, and I was bitten by the radio bug by doing that. I absolutely loved it. So alongside that work, which was only part-time because it was only on home matches, I got a voluntary position in our local hospital radio and did hospital radio for a year, had my own show.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure anybody really listened, but we did have we had a list. There was a hit list of songs you're not allowed to play on hospital radio, including "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" and "Three Steps to Heaven."
Another one bites the dust.
Well, yes, that probably was too.
Oh dear.
Yes, so that was fun. That was fun. I enjoyed doing that, but I realised that was what I wanted to do. So I was really lucky because we get really interesting people would come in the studio. I mean, I made a cup of coffee, instant coffee with powdered milk in for Richard Branson when he came in one day, and all sorts of people drank horrible brown liquid that I produced for them in my broadcast assistant days.
It was also the days before Starbucks and Costa and any of that kind of coffee, and everybody drank that kind of coffee. He'll have been very grateful for it, I'm sure. I think so.
But I was also able to speak to other broadcasters like John Mutson from Match of the Day. Wow. So he knew my boss quite well, and he'd said, next time John's in, you need to speak to him about what you need to do next in order to progress in your career. And he told me I needed to go back to university and study journalism,
right,
and be a general journalist. And I really wanted to be a sports journalist, actually, because that's all I knew. Because it was,
of course,
I was exposed to the football. So he said, go and be a journalist for a few years and then specialise if you want to, and then you could be a sports journalist. So I took his advice, went back to university, and then was very lucky that I got some freelance work at the BBC in Manchester.
Right.
And then went and worked in the BBC in Radio Stoke, and then finally Radio Sheffield. Wow. So I had about 6 years working in BBC local radio, which was brilliant. Really, really enjoyed it. And whilst at those times I didn't do much creative things because it's quite demanding, it's shifts, working weekends, and it's different shifts every week, and I felt there wasn't the brain capacity to be able to sit down and do much creative stuff. But by mixing sounds and telling a story with sounds, that kind of scratched that creative itch.
It's creative in a different way, isn't it? Because there are so many ways to be creative, and I suppose you can think about weaving all the sounds together to create the story at the end, a bit like putting the pieces of a quilt together to have the finished item, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's still a creative job, isn't it? It's just not the same as the sewing or knitting or crochet that you do now. No, I love that. I love that you've almost always been guided to end up here. Not knowing where you were going to go, and then somebody said, what about this? And 15 minutes later, there you go. And then go back to university and do journalism, which was probably the last thing that you felt like doing.
Absolutely. It did take a bit of convincing. It was like, surely there's another way. But no, there wasn't.
But all of those things that you'll have learnt there have brought you to where you are now, because nothing's ever wasted, is it? Even with creativity or crocheting, knitting, if you pull it out and then redo it, you've still learnt something in the process. So everything that you learn by going back to university to relearn journalism is now what's made this fabulous podcast. So if we go back to your blog that you started because the podcast came later, didn't it? So if we go back to the blog, then your first blog was called Postcard from Gibraltar, and that's because that's where you lived for quite a while.
Yeah, that's right. So I left journalism when I had my first child, and in the meantime, before getting the chance to ever go back to the world of broadcasting, we ended up as a family moving to Gibraltar because of work, and we had 2 boys by the time we moved out to Gibraltar, and then I was expecting boy number 3, who came along a bit later.
The little postcards, as you
call
them on the blog.
Yes, that's right, exactly. And I'd become fascinated with blogging and craft blogging in particular.
Right.
And there were a certain handful of blogs that I would religiously seek out, one being Lucy at Attic 24.
Yes.
And I was just amazed. And also, I was a tiny bit homesick for England and the changing seasons, and I found that her blog not only had the beautiful colours and crochet that she'd share, but also she'd take you on walks in sort of rural Yorkshire, and it just looked so beautiful and so completely different from what I was seeing out of my window, which I'm sure most people would give their eye teeth for, to see the blue sky and the sea and that, but when you've got it every day, you do kind of miss home a little bit.
I think that's quite a normal way to feel. I know that there are people who say to me with my posts, and I know that they say them to Lucy as well, if they're expat somewhere, then it's a taste of home, and that connection of you don't necessarily want to go back there. So somebody who might have lived abroad for many years has got their own life, they're established, they're very happy there, but sometimes it's just look at the colours on that tree, or oh, you had that cup of tea, and we don't have tea in the same way in this country that we're in, and so that, but that connection that links them, that's really important. And it doesn't mean that you don't appreciate what you've got. It just means that you potentially appreciate what you've left, whereas maybe you didn't. It was every day, wasn't it? So you didn't maybe notice it in quite the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I was going to say, and then you also got back into your creativity when you were there. But did you have something else about the blogging, because they all came together, didn't they?
Yeah, it kind of did. I think it was to do with the age of the children. I mean, I went back to crochet when I was expecting baby number 3, the littlest postcard.
The stamp.
Yes, he was still a stamp at the time. So I got into crochet then, and because I think I felt I hadn't actually worked a proper job, a paid job, should I say, since having baby number 1. And I had a couple of voluntary roles then over in Gibraltar. I helped set up and run a toddler group for 6 years actually while we were there, which was called Craft and Play, because us mums were like, oh, it's not a proper toddler group unless there's lots of licking and sticking and painting and whatnot and cutting out. So I did get a bit of creativity that way, but not necessarily in the way that I would have enjoyed. It involved a lot of toilet roll tubes and paper plates. But so I'd kind of got back into my crochet, and then fast forward a few years, and when my youngest was going to nursery, I suddenly had a bit of time for me.
Oh my goodness, that you almost don't know what to do with yourself, do you? You wave them off and it's like, oh, I've got 2 hours.
I know, and it was like, I am not going to spend that time cleaning the flat.
No.
I'm going to do something fun. And I heard about, there was a local artist who ran watercolour classes, and it was like, I've never done watercolour. I've not painted since I was at school, and I'm not sure I'll be very good, but do you know what? I might as well try it.
Yes.
So I went along, and it was completely from beginners. It was brilliant. She taught us all sorts of things about mixing the colours and putting salt on so that it has a different effect and sucks the water out. And it was brilliant. I really enjoyed that, and I made a friend through that who was very crafty and creative herself, and she'd heard about it. There was a dressmaking teacher who was opening up once a year. She would open up classes and take on new students, and I think it was limited to about 7 or 8 students every year, and you could sign up and learn proper dressmaking from drafting patterns right the way through. And she's like, Lindsay, do you fancy signing up for this? And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm not doing anything on a Tuesday morning. I think I will. So by this point, my youngest was then starting school. Yeah. And it was like, yeah, I think I'll go for that. So then I started doing dressmaking lessons as well. So my teacher, Dorcas Hammond, is an amazing woman. And she'd kind of built up this amazing business from scratch. There was sewing in her family, and amazingly, so her name, which is very unusual, the only time I'd ever come across the name Dorcas before was that my mum has a box of pins in her sewing box.
My nan had one.
Yeah, and it was like, that's bonkers, I've never heard that name before, and her name came up in one of our lessons, and it was like, well, yes, it's a biblical name. Right. Dorcas was in the Old Testament, and she used to make clothes for poor people. Oh, wow. So she was like, it's almost like it was meant to be. I was meant to be, use my hands and sew. So but the clothes that Dorcas makes or made were incredible ball gowns and wedding dresses. She'd make, mother of the bride outfits bespoke, and she'd actually made the dress for a lady called Cayenne Alderino, who was Miss Gibraltar the year that we first moved to Gibraltar, who went on to win Miss World. Wow. And she was wearing a dress that Dorcas had made. So we were learning from the best, and you'd look at these amazing gowns as you walked through into the back of her workshop, and then we'd start figuring out how to put an invisible zip in and darts and all that kind of thing. So she's brilliant, and amazingly we very recently had a trip back to Gibraltar. And it was the first time I'd been back since we left in 2020, and I was able to meet up with Dorcas.
Oh, amazing.
And it was so lovely to chat with her again.
Because of course you went in your ball gown, didn't you?
Naturally, yes. Yeah, I didn't admit to her. I don't know if she'll listen to this, but the waistcoat that I started making in 2019, but then I left in the middle of making is still in bits. With waiting to be pattern matched.
You are just waiting for the right moment to pick it up again.
Exactly.
And I've got to say, because I've been reading the old postcards.
Yeah.
And I went down the rabbit hole, and before we were going to be talking, I thought I'm just going to check some dates. I'm just, oh my goodness, 3 hours later, and I'm looking at all of. You've got postcards from all kinds of places, and such lovely stories about Gibraltar and the country and gorgeous photos, and there are some watercolour pictures on there as well. That I thought they were excellent.
Oh, bless you! I'll pay you later.
I really like those. So considering that it wasn't something that you'd done before, I think that they were really good, and I was looking at those going, well, I would not be producing those if I went to classes when my girls have been going to nursery. But anyway, that's probably why I'm just better sticking to painting walls, I think. So while you were in Gibraltar, and then you rediscovered your crafting, and you hadn't totally left the journalism behind, had you? Because you were able to start that up again while you were there.
Yeah.
So you had the Postcard from Gibraltar blog. Yeah. And then you started doing more speaking, but then as well, didn't you? And you were doing more of the journalism. What were you involved in then?
Yeah. Well, I went for a job. Somebody who I knew, one of my expat friends who knew my backstory, and in fact had known me from before us moving to Gibraltar. She heard about there was a vacancy on the local TV channel to read the news, and she just sent me the Facebook post and said, I think you should apply. And it was just a part-time freelance position, and I thought, yeah, all right then.
Why not? What have you got?
Nothing ventured. So I applied, and I got the job. So, the local radio and TV station, the Gibraltar Broadcasting Corporation, it's a very small operation, obviously, because Gibraltar's a small place. When we lived there, when we first moved there, the population of Gibraltar itself was 32,000. Right.
You're not trying to downplay this in any way, are you? I'm sitting opposite somebody who used to read the news on the telly.
Well, yes, I did. That is true. But yes, so I managed to get a job, and that was really fun, because whilst I'd done a little tiny bit of radio presenting in the past, and mainly reporting when I was at the BBC, I'd never really appeared on camera properly. And that was a whole different world of having to turn up an hour before you go on air so you can have all the makeup painted on your face. Yes. Which it was, it's known that TV makeup is slightly more severe than what you'd wear on a normal day. I was slightly widow twanky at times with the amount of eyeshadow and mascara that went on. But no, it was. It didn't look like widow twanky under the harsh lights of the TV, I'm pleased to say. But yes, it was a bit more than I wear on a normal basis. But yeah, that was really fun, actually. Yeah. And it reminded me of how much I'd enjoyed being in live radio, because the adrenaline of, the jingles playing of the TV news theme, and the top story hasn't been loaded into auto cue yet, and it's just a minute, something's happened, and then they're sending it through, and you don't actually know what you're going to be reading when the cameras go on. You have to shuffle your papers. But yeah, no, that was lots of fun. And then out of that, I got the chance to had my own radio show, did the weekend breakfast show, either the Saturday or the Sunday morning. So that was quite a laugh, really. I mean, having to let yourself into the building first thing in the morning and turn off the burglar alarm, turn all the lights on, go and get a cup of coffee and get your playlist all sorted.
You're not making it sound that glamorous now.
It's not. Hate to shatter the illusion, but no, it's not. But it's good fun, and getting regular people phoning in, and entering the competitions with the same people that would be phoning in every week, and you'd have a bit of a relationship really with the listeners, and it was lovely. It was fun. When I was saying it's just a very small TV show, it was I think I got recognised once. I was with my eldest at the time, and we were in the local supermarket, and there was an elderly lady next to the cabbages, leaning over her trolley. And she turned round and she did a double take and she went, "Oh, it's you!" She says, "Oh, wait till I tell my husband I've seen the girl off the television." And my son you could just see the expression on his face. He just wanted the floor to open up and eat him.
Oh, my
and it
goodness.
was like, it was absolutely mortified. But yes, that is my 15 minutes of fame.
No, I think that's brilliant. And that lady will have been dining out on that for weeks, for years, won't she? How fortunate that you were there by the cabbages at just the right time.
My life is non-stop glamour.
So in 2020 you left Gibraltar and you
Yes.
came back to the UK,
Yeah.
and that was very well timed, as you'll have returned just in time for COVID and the lockdowns and all the stuff that went with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And you decided to start a different type of podcast.
Yeah.
And so where did the idea for Making Stitches actually come from?
Well, so a little bit of backstory to that is that whilst I was doing my radio show, as you wouldn't see from the blog, when I was in Gibraltar, I just found it a fascinating place. It's a bit like an onion. I mean, for people who turn up on a cruise ship or on a coach tour from the Costa del Sol and spend 4, 5, 6 hours there and get whisked around in a taxi and up the rock and see the apes and do the cable car and all that kind of thing, get back in and it's like Gibraltar done, tick.
Yeah.
And it's like, but the longer that you live there, like an onion, there's so many layers. You find out there's the history of the place, and there's so much more to it than just fish and chips and a red phone box that everybody has to have their picture taken next to, or a bobby in a UK police uniform. And whilst I was there, I thought, I knew that there was a significant anniversary coming up the following year, and it was that General Franco in 1969 closed the border between Gibraltar and Spain.
Right.
And it was a bit like, all of a sudden, the Berlin Wall appearing.
Oh.
Families were cut off from relatives on the other side of the border. The
such
phone
a
lines were
Terrible
cut.
thing to have done.
I know, and it stayed like that until the mid-1980s. So people who were my age had grown up behind the closed frontier.
Right.
And I I didn't know anything about this. I didn't even know it had happened for 5 years of living there. It had never come up in conversation or anything. It was just something that had happened and people didn't talk about. And then I started hearing little bits here and there and thinking, well, what are they talking about? I don't know anything about like that. And I like to think I'm a bit inquisitive with the journalistic background. It's like, how have I not known anything about this? So I wanted to scratch a bit deeper and do a bit of research into it. So I'd said to my bosses in the radio station, could I do a documentary series or something? They were like, that's not really what we do here. And I said, but I really, it was like an itch that I had to scratch. And I said, right, okay then. Am I allowed to do a podcast, even though I'm on the radio? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. You go ahead and do your own thing, feel free. So I went off and I set up my own podcast, which was called Gibraltar Stories, which featured interviews with interesting people and interesting stories. A bit like Making Stitches in a way. It was almost like, the springboard onto that. And then I built up to doing a 5-part series, documentary series about the closed frontier, which was brilliant. I got to speak to people who'd grown up behind the closed frontier, people who were teenagers when it happened and it was like their wings had been clipped and they'd lost their freedom, and families that were separated, and it was absolutely brilliant. And I love doing this podcast series. And then it transpired in 2020, early 2020, that we were going to be relocating back to England. And I thought, well, I can't do Gibraltar Stories in England.
No.
But I've realised I really enjoyed being able to interview people, edit things together and do the podcast, because it's so easy to do now. You just have a microphone, you have a way of recording it, you can edit on your laptop using free software. There's a very low, bar as far as cost for entry to do podcasting. So I thought, I don't want to give up my podcasting, but I can't do a podcast about Gibraltar in England. So we went into the first lockdown and we were still in Gibraltar at the time. And I thought, right, well, knowing that we were going to be moving in the summer, I thought now's the time to start thinking about what it is I want to do to take back home with me. So then I launched Making Stitches, because I thought, well, I'd love to do a podcast about craft. And at the time, I couldn't find any podcasts about craft that didn't involve people talking about their own craft and what was in their stash and what they were working on and what designs they had and everything. I thought it would be completely new to be able to do a podcast that spoke to other people and interviewed individuals about what they were doing. So that's why I decided to do that. As it transpired, around about the same time as I launched, at least one other podcast did the same thing.
Right.
So it wasn't completely new, but it was a new angle for me, and it was one that would travel. So my first few episodes were recorded either over Facebook Messenger, because I didn't realise how to do it, and then I managed to figure out Zoom once the wonderful world of Zoom opened up to us.
Yes, pandemic on one hand and Zoom on the other, and they were just
a match made in heaven.
Well, kind of. I'm not sure that anybody would necessarily want either of them compared to how it used to be. But anyway, that's it certainly makes life so much easier for so many things, doesn't it?
Exactly.
And certainly for you, being at the point where you were going to transit between two countries, it just meant that you could really get going, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Making Stitches was born, I think, in April of 2020, and then we moved during the school summer holidays that year, and it came with me and has been with me ever since. But it's one thing that's really nice about being back in the UK and being near to people who were crafting is the fact that I can get to, not everybody's done on Zoom anymore. I can actually do interviews in person, and actually it's because of Making Stitches that we know each other, isn't it, Christy?
Yes, it is.
Because we did the first interview over Zoom and then realised we lived quite close to each other.
That's right. And now you just can't shake me off now, can you?
That's a very nice situation to be in.
Well, thank you. But you're not getting out of any more questions. We've not finished. So in 2022, so a couple of years, if we fast forward a couple of years from when you came back, then you renamed your original Postcard from Gibraltar blog to be part of Making Stitches. So it's all combined together. Yeah. And that's where you can find all of your original posts. That's where I found them all, went down the rabbit hole. What a lovely time I had. Everybody needs to go and read these. That's also where there's a link to the Gibraltar stories, if anybody's interested in finding that podcast there, aren't they? And so all of your original blog posts are there, your more recent posts, which include the podcast episodes, and your crochet designs are on there as well, aren't they? And you've designed a number of patterns that are either your standalone ones. You've done some lovely dolls that all connected with the garden. And you've also worked with Inside Crochet, and you've published some other patterns elsewhere. You've run a blanket crochet along this year with a special bonus birthday square with a cake and a candle. How you've designed that? It's amazing! Oh my goodness, that was fabulous. I think that's one of my favourite squares. And you've had a special collaboration pattern with Eleonora of Coastal Crochet, who's a good friend of yours, and she's also celebrating an anniversary year. And I'm looking at the special pattern, which is just behind your shoulder. So I'm going to stop talking, and then you can tell everybody a bit more about all of this.
Yeah, well, it was Eleonora. Actually, she started her website about 2 weeks before I started my blog, and the platform that we both chose to use, it encouraged you to read other people's blogs and then interact in order to kind of build up a relationship with other people who were blogging at the same time. And it just so happened I stumbled across Coastal Crochet in its early days, and I'd leave messages on her blog posts and she'd leave messages on my blog posts, and it kind of just grew over the years. And I mean, obviously everybody starts very small.
Yes.
And then over time she started doing crochet designs, and at that point I just thought I just take my hat off to anybody who can design any patterns, because I wouldn't know where to start. But I was, you know, vociferously consuming lots of other people's patterns, Eleonora's, and also I've done a few blankets done by Lucy from Attic 24, and lots of other people too. And Eleonora decided to launch her first ever crochet along. I think it might have been around 2016 or 2017, that kind of time. And it was a seaside stash busting blanket. And I can vividly remember the day I was sitting in my lounge in Gibraltar and she posted the first few rows of this blanket. And it just grabbed me. And I thought, you know what? I've never done a blanket crochet along and managed to keep up with it before. And also the colours that she had used, I had sitting in my stash, the exact same shades of turquoise and white, the waves of the sea. And I just thought, I've just got to do this. So I joined in, and I did that first one without even thinking about what the finished blanket was going to look like. And as I was working, I thought, you know, it would be really nice to try and reflect Gibraltar in this blanket. Yeah. And so I decided the bottom of it would be the sea, then there'd be the beach, then there'd be houses, and then the rock of Gibraltar, and then the cloud and the sky up above. And that was how the blanket was going to progress. So Eleonora is brilliant at doing weekly roundups as people are crocheting along and sharing pictures of everybody's progress. So I would be doing my little bit, taking a picture on the beach or whatever. And sometimes my pictures would appear in Eleonora's roundup, and you can't beat that feeling.
No, you can't. There's me. No, I agree.
So we you know, obviously we had a little bit of a history together, but then that kind of cemented our like online friendship, as it were, and we'd, you know, message each other through social media. And then when the actual podcast launched, Making Stitches, I thought, well, do you know, there's a few people that I know from blogging for 5 years. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they'd be interested in being interviewed. And Eleonora actually was, I think she features in episode 2. And brilliant. By that point she'd done several crochet alongs, and she was designing for Simply Crochet and Inside Crochet and all over the place, and had, you know, collaborations with yarn companies and various different things. So compared to my little postcard from Gibraltar, you know, Eleonora's trajectory was stratospheric in comparison.
Oh, but you were going in slightly different directions.
We were,
so
definitely.
It wasn't like you were travelling along the same road.
No, not. So. I mean, I wasn't designing at that point. I didn't have the confidence to have a go myself at that point. So.
There is a picture of the very same blanket on the blog, isn't it? Was it called? Is it called the Sandy Bay blanket?
That's right. Yes.
And there it is in the beach.
Yes, at Sandy Bay. And my dad, when Mum and Dad came over to visit us one time, it was like, Dad, would you come down the beach with me? Why? It's like, I need you to hold a blanket, please. There is a picture of my dad. You can just see his sandaled feet poking out underneath the blanket.
Immortality in his sandals.
And also, I mean, the fact is, when I had Postcard from Gibraltar, I chose to be anonymous. That was something that I decided to do, actually, because I felt like Gibraltar's such a small place. And I didn't want to put my head above the parapet. I'm sure nothing would have happened, but I just didn't have the confidence to put myself out there. So I was an anonymous blogger. I was, you know, Postcard from Gibraltar, and that was it. So
I was absolutely the same with Winwick Mum in the beginning, because it started as a little article in our church newsletter, and it was so the monthly musing that I still put on the blog. That's what it was. It was only a very short piece, and it went in between the hairdressers and the home watch thing, but I didn't want anybody tapping me on the shoulder in the shop. So when I'd gone in for my pint of milk, so I thought, well, I'll be anonymous as well. And I'm quite sure that lots and lots of us start off that way.
Yeah, it's quite a big thing to put yourself out there.
It is. It really is. It really is. And we can all imagine that something terrible is going to happen as soon as we we put our name to something that's out there, and that's not the case. But you know, if you wanted to start with a pseudonym, then I think that's absolutely fine, and then see how you feel later. Unfortunately for everybody now, everybody knows you as Lindsay.
Yeah. Yes, I came out from behind my postcard.
So you've talked about the crochet that you did with Eleonora's patterns, and then when did you start designing your own?
Yeah, so I think my first pattern, which was for a little doll that was the shape of a snowdrop, I can remember doing it whilst Joe Biden was being inaugurated on the television,
Right,
and crocheting that. So
that's a while ago.
that dates it to January 2021. So that was my first design, but I didn't actually release that pattern for a while. I did a different doll, which I did as a free pattern on my blog back in the day for a gardener, because I'd always loved gardening when we lived in the UK before we moved out to Gibraltar, and then in Gibraltar we lived in an apartment, and we were lucky we had a balcony and we had, you know, pots of geraniums out there and such like, but it wasn't like having your own garden. And coming back to the UK and having a garden that I could call my own,
yeah, that would be fabulous.
That was amazing. So that's kind of what inspired my patterns, and by that point I'd made so much amigurumi, and then also I'd tweaked amigurumi patterns to suit me, and then you think actually it's not a massive leap between tweaking somebody else's pattern and writing something yourself from scratch. So that's kind of how I went down that route, and then released a series of little crochet people.
Yeah, you've got quite a few now, haven't you?
Yes.
They're lovely. Yeah, because you had, did you have two of them out last Christmas?
A few Christmases ago, actually. I think
it?
Holly and
Ivy?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm losing track of the time.
You and me both.
Oh my goodness! And those patterns are on the blog as well, aren't they?
Yeah, you can access the patterns on the blog, and some of them they're on my Etsy shop. You can buy the downloadable PDF, so you can access all of that via the blog.
You've done a couple of wreaths as well, haven't you? Because one of them is a special celebration birthday one.
Yes, that I did with Eleonora. Yes.
So tell me some more about that.
Yeah, so basically we met for the first time in I think it was 2022. We both ended up at Yarndale at the same time, and I went to hear Eleonora speak, and I told her beforehand I was going to be there, so we were able to have a nice chat.
She didn't run away.
She didn't run away, and I was able to interview her in person instead of over Zoom. So I interviewed her for the podcast then, and then 2 years later, we both ended up at Yarndale again. And we knew then that we both had this anniversary coming up this year. So this was September last year. And I don't know whether it was me or Eleonora who suggested it might be nice to do something together to mark this 10 years of blogging. So we went away and had a bit of a think, and then we came up with this collective wreath pattern. And I'd suggested, because certainly one of Eleonora's beautiful blanket patterns, of which she's done a few different varieties. I think it started off as Picnic on the Beach, and then there was Picnic by the River, and I think possibly a third version. But the centre square of this blanket was Tunisian crochet in gingham. Pattern.
Amazing. So just like a picnic blanket.
Exactly. So I it seemed very signature Eleonora.
Yes.
So I said to her, maybe we could we do the wreath cover in your gingham? So she had to rejig it so it was done with the bias so that it would stretch around a wreath base. And I'd said, well, I've actually designed a little birthday cake already that I had for something else, which I've not done the pattern of, and so we popped the birthday cake on, and I did some balloons, and she did some bunting as well that she worked on previously, so we put these together, and so that was the Let's Celebrate wreath was born this summer.
It's fabulous. It's because as I'm looking at it, then I can see I can see the tablecloth, which is the ring, and then the balloons and the bunting, and a big fat cake with a candle right in the middle, and it's a cracking wreath if somebody was celebrating, maybe somebody wants to make something for a big birthday or something like that. Or years and years ago we had something called the birthday hat, but we used to bring out, and whoever's birthday it was had to put the hat on while the cake and the candles are being blown out. And this is the sort of thing that somebody might bring out when there was a birthday for somebody in the family. It's a lovely, lovely pattern, and it's absolutely right for celebrating such a big anniversary. It's brilliant. You've done such a good job between you.
Yeah, no, I'm really pleased with it, and that's kind of the thing. I mean, we both had a chat about the fact that in both households we would have birthday bunting that came out every year, and it would be like, well, how nice if you had something that you brought out every time there was a birthday in the house. So we don't have a birthday in the house at the moment, but I can't bring myself to put it away, so it's been sitting there for 6 months.
We're talking about celebrating today, aren't
we?
We
are indeed.
It should be there, I think.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna ask you a question now, and I think this might be a really difficult one. So what is your favourite part about the Making Stitches podcast? And I'm not going to ask you about favourite guests, because that would be unfair, and I'll be most offended if you don't say me. But what keeps you recording the episodes?
Oh, well, I find people stories fascinating. I love talking to people and finding out about, what makes them tick, and what they do and their experiences that I have in common with them, and things that are different, and how people choose to take different paths in life, and how they've ended up doing what they're doing, which hankers back to my journalism days, really. Of
course, yeah.
The best thing about being a journalist is being able to shine a light on people and causes and things that need to be, told to the outside world. And I really loved doing that when I was a journalist. I didn't like the unpleasant side of the job, but I like to be able to go and speak to somebody who had a campaign or something that needed to be amplified, and help them amplify their voice. And this is something that I can continue to do with Making Stitches, which I absolutely love. It's hearing people's stories, and then also the very best bit about being a broadcast journalist was being able to immerse yourself in a place and the sound of the place, and record the sound effects, and then be able to weave that through the story that you're telling, which was the creative side of broadcasting, which I really, really loved. And when I do get the chance to go to a yarn festival or an event somewhere and record the background noise and the atmosphere, or the noise of whatever craft is being done, and be able to weave that through the narrative in the podcast episode, I love doing that. That's magic, but it does take a lot of time. And it's not something I can do for every episode. But when I get the chance to do it, they're my favourite ones.
I think you can tell that, because I've listened to those episodes where you've been to a festival or a stitching show or something, and you're speaking to the people, and then there's the sounds that go there, and there's just a different feel about those episodes. I think you can really tell that they are your favourite sorts, and they're brilliant. They're brilliant. I really like those ones.
Oh, thanks, Christine.
So staying with the podcast, you were a finalist in the Independent Podcast Awards in 2023, which is very well deserved. And I believe that Making Stitches is one of the most listened to podcasts. You've had over 100,000 downloads, and that's another incredible achievement. So what comes next? Because, of course, there's always a what comes next, isn't there?
Well, that's very kind of you to say so. Yes, I mean, there are times that it does appear near the top of the podcast charts in craft, which blows my tiny mind. I can remember there was one week a few years back where it was either number 1 or number 2 in about 6 different countries.
That is amazing.
Which was bonkers, because there's me and my little hard disk recorder and a steam-powered laptop and free editing software, and to think that it can get into people's ears in, I think, 5 continents in the world it's been listened to.
That is incredible, isn't it?
Which is amazing. And it's a bit like, small businesses say they do a happy dance when they make a sale, and it's a bit like that when I see something like that, and a new city or a new country's popped up on my analytics, which is lovely. But as for what happens next, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I love doing it. It does take a lot of time. And certainly when I went back to work, I did doubt whether I'd be able to maintain it. I can only really do about 20 episodes a year. So 2 series of 10 episodes, one at the beginning of the year and one towards the end. And I think I'll stick with that formula. But yeah, I think just keep doing what I've been doing, and
that's what we wanted to hear.
Oh.
That was the right answer.
Oh, I am glad. Yes, we'll just see where 2026 takes me.
Oh, well, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you. It's always a joy to hear you speak when you're not asking the questions, because we can have these conversations when we're having a cup of tea, but I know that everybody else doesn't always get to hear those, and it's been really lovely to hear your stories today. So thank you for talking to me about those, and letting me drop my bits in every now and again.
Well, thank you for asking me, Christine, because this was your idea, wasn't it? Way back, you said.
I think it was a joint plan.
But it's been fascinating. I was a bit trepidatious beforehand because I'm used to asking the questions, not answering them.
That's it.
It's a bit different, isn't it?
It is a bit different being on the other side.
Yeah, but no, I've loved it. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Lindsay will be back soon with another creative guest. But for today, I hope you've enjoyed listening. Do take care of yourself and enjoy your crafting.
I'm so grateful to Christine for being my interviewer for this special episode. This episode brings the 10th series of Making Stitches to a close. I'm hoping to be back again later on in 2026 with some more creative chats for you to enjoy. Until then though, I do hope you have a lovely new year. Take care of yourself and enjoy your crafting.